So if you see this React Native, this consists of two words, right? One is React and another is native. So before we go into React Native, first of all, you have to understand the core difference of what React Native is and what React is. So you guys know, right, that this particular framework, JavaScript framework, is built by Facebook or developed by Facebook. When this was developed initially, we had React. So this is basically a UI library. This library or a framework that helps you to gives you a user interface, right? Now, if I talk about a user interface, the user interface can be a kind of a, let's say, a front end part that may relate, that you can relate with either with web or as a mobile. So this React initially was only used for building a user interface for web in its initial releases, like when it started. It's almost now, I think 7 years back, 7 to 8 years back. That time, this React library was used to develop a user interface that was only focused for web part. So we can say that this React is basically a JavaScript based UI library that is used to build a user interface for web applications. Right. Now, as this is a UI library, now the overall aim of the library is incomplete if it just covers only one platform. So currently in our modern era, we have a lot of platforms, right? You can classify these into web and as well as on a mobile. So this overall aim of the library fails if it only supports one platform and doesn't support another platform. So here what I mean that if it only supports web and it doesn't support mobile. Now, using simply this React UI library, you cannot develop an application or an interface for a mobile application. The reason is the web architecture, how the application is developed for the websites. They are completely different. The architecture of the web is different. And if you see the architecture of the mobile application, they are a bit different. Let's take an example. If you want to have a container, an empty container or normal container for a web, so what we usually do, we use div, right? So this div element. So this div element gives you a generic container, right? You can assume that this div is nothing but a box. You see this red part, right? A generic box where all your content is placed. If you see this particular screen, the wider white area is a container, and inside this container you have all these elements, right? You have this header bar, you have this breadcrumb, you have left navigation, and so on, like, and then you have a footer. So these are all under a div. So basically you can see that inside this container, lot of individual elements are arranged in a very systematic manner to give you a interface, a meaningful interface, right? So here, if you see this currently page, this page is not built of only one component called div, right? So it also have a text, it also have an image, it have left navigation, it has the header bar, it has a breadcrumb, it has footer, right? So all these elements are combined together to give a meaningful interface, right? So with React, you can build a beautiful interface. Okay, but in the same way, if you want to get a container on a mobile screen, right? So it is not possible by using div, because this div it can be only used for web applications to get a container, because the way the web architecture is completely different from the mobile, right? Because this architecture only supports on a browser, but standalone application doesn't follow the web architecture. So for that, they have their own set of components and architecture. So, okay, so now we understood that this React is basically a JavaScript library that is used for building a user interface, mainly for web, right? As I said, the overall aim of the library fails if it doesn't support other platforms such as mobile applications or tablets, right? Then how to cover that gap? So to cover that gap, the Facebook team, the development team came up with a framework. So this is basically a library, right? But this is a framework. The framework that will use all the core concepts of React. What it means, if I say the core concepts of React, it means if you see these concepts, that it uses JSX, rendering element, component props, state cycle, handling element. So these all concepts will be used in React Native as well. So what happened, like this React Native, like the Facebook team developed a framework called React Native that will use all the core concepts such as lifecycle methods, or you can say state props, how the element get rendered, how do we maintain a state. So all those basic concepts remains as it is from the React. Now, what this framework additionally do? Okay, so this framework came up with something called components. Here, what is component do? As I told, in order to get a container on the web, we use div. In the same way, in order to get a container on a mobile device, we'll use view. Now, this view is used to get a container. Fine. Now, if I say that we are going to build a mobile application, so currently we have iOS-based applications, we have Android-based application, right? Primarily. And then we also have a Windows OS-based application as well. But primarily, I'll be talking about more about the Android and iOS part. So here, to get a view in Android, we use Android.view. If you want to get a view in a native application of iOS, we use UI view. But here, this framework, if you use in this framework, if you use view, the same code will help you to get a component or a container on both the platforms. I'll come to that part. But just to understand that the Facebook team came up with this framework that uses all the core concepts of React, and it has its own core component that will help you to render a screen on the mobile application. Right. So now you are very clear that React Native, it uses React, all the concepts of React, correct? That is clear. Now, scripting. This React says this is a JavaScript library. So it means all the business logic, all the scripting part that will be wrote in a JavaScript. Or you can also use TypeScript. So if you guys are not aware of JavaScript or TypeScript, so let me give you an overview. So this JavaScript and types, what is the major difference between JavaScript and TypeScript? So you can say that TypeScript is just an advanced version or advanced form of JavaScript that has been built by Microsoft in order to cope up some of the demerits of JavaScript. So that we can go later, like the major difference, but right now just understand that you can either write in a plain JavaScript or also you can use TypeScript. Fine. So TypeScript ultimately, when it compiles, it gets converted into JavaScript. And this JavaScript is a plain vanilla JavaScript, right? So either you can write the logic in TypeScript or JavaScript. Okay, fine. Now, so now it comes here the definition. So what basically is React Native? So React Native is basically a framework that uses all the core concepts of React in order to build beautiful mobile applications that would run on both iOS and Android, right? So it will run both on iOS and Android. And you can see here, it says that create native apps for Android and iOS using React, right? Here, in this React Native, you do not need to worry about a different code base. So what I mean, so if you see, there are majorly two platforms on an mobile side. One is iOS, one is Android. So if you take an example of the native application, so do you guys understand what is native iOS app and what is native Android app? Anyone from the team? Bagu, Manoj, or Senthil? Do you guys understand?
Yes, I can able to understand.
No, so what do you understand by native iOS application and native Android application? Do you guys know the difference? No? Okay. So see, mobile application can be categorized into different types. One is native application, another can be a hybrid application. So what do you mean by native native apps? So there will be some apps that will be written in such a way that it will run only on one platform, that is Android. And there can be apps that can be written in such a way that it only runs on iOS. Okay. So it means, let's say I want to develop an app. Let's say a food app. Okay. Now, if I develop these apps using the technologies that is used to develop the native application. So what it means? Okay. So there is some comment with Manoj that native means own code without other codes. Yeah, kind of, but see, right now, what is the major difference between the native apps, like native iOS app and native Android app? So the native iOS app, let's say, first talk about the native iOS app. So these apps are built using Objective-C, like they are built, like the native iOS applications are mainly scripted and built using Objective-C and Xcode framework. So it means the IDE is Xcode and they use Objective-C or Swift in order to build a native iOS app. So what now this means, like when you build this application on Objective-C or Swift and using Xcode IDE, that application will only run on iOS platform. It cannot be deployed on an Android platform because again, Android works, Android OS works in a very different way. iOS works in a very different way, right? Because you can say the manufacturer are different. So these iOS, the system architecture of the mobile applications, as well as the product has been developed by Apple, and Android. I think you guys almost know that this isn't an open source framework, right? Mainly handled by Google. So in order to develop a native application for iOS, we can use Objective-C, Swift, and Xcode. So it means when you develop the application using Objective-C, Swift, or Xcode, it means it will only run on iPhone or an iPad. It means Apple devices. It won't run on Android. Now, if I say that you are writing a native Android application or you're building a native Android application, so that means that you are gonna write a code using Android Studio, Java, or Kotlin, and that application or code will only run on one platform, that is Android. It means the code that you write on Android Studio using Java or Kotlin, it won't run on iOS device. and the application that you built using a native iOS scripting platform such as Xcode, Objective-C, or Swift, it won't run on Android. So they are two different application, right? Using a different tech stack. So what happens? Like, what are the challenges here? So let's say I want to build a food app, right? I want to build a food app. Fine. Now, if I want to release this in market, so in the market we have a lot of user base. One is few users have Android phones, few users have Apple phones, right? So ideally what we do, we don't release only for one platform, we release for both the platform. Means the app that can be downloadable on both the platform. So if you are writing a mobile application using Objective-C, so what you will do, you will hire a resource maybe, or yourself will first learn. If you're not aware of mobile technologies, first what you will do, you will first learn about what is Xcode. You will learn how to program in Objective-C or Swift. And probably, let's take an example, you take 6 months to build an application for iOS. Okay, so now after 6 months, you learned Objective-C, Swift, and you developed an application that runs on iOS. Fine. So you develop an application for iOS. You covered the iOS side. Okay. But what about Android part? You are still not covered on the Android side, right? So again, what you do? Again, you will learn maybe Android Studio, Objective-C, Swift, another 6 months. So to develop a single application for both the platform, if you're working alone, you took 12 months. Or if you, let's say, if you are a company, if you are a manager, so what you will do? You'll basically hire two different resources, right? One for Android, one for iOS, in order to build it in a very short time. So why not to cut all these time and time barriers, and along with the cost barrier, right? So we came up with something called a common code base. So what it means that you write a code in such a way that it gets deployed on both the device and on both the device. So here that it is, the solution here is React Native. So using React Native, we are going to build an app that will use a common code base. It means you have to write a single code that will run completely fine on both the platforms, right? So now here the questions come that just now I told that iOS use Objective-C, Swift, Android use Java. So how we can write such code that will run both the platform? So that's what here React Native comes. Here we use JavaScript, the scripting language, and along with the component that we use from React Native. And what happened behind the scene, that React Native, there is a concept of metro bundler. You can say an engine that is running, and it consistently talk with your native UI threads, or it talks with your native APIs and help you to render the component on the screen. So let me show you that part. Let's take an example of a view. Okay, so if you see here, views map directly to the native view equivalent or whatever platform React Native is running, whether that is UI view, div, Android view, etc. So what it does when you write this code, if a code is running on an Android device, so we have a metro bundler or a thread running that talks to, if you're running on Android, it will talk to Android.view API, and it will say that, okay, I am gonna render a view on an Android device, so you please help me to get a view for Android device. And the code written here, the common code that you see here, the component view, will talk to the native APIs, and it will get you a view or a container render. In the same way, when the applications run on an iOS device, so what happens? This view talks with this UI view and get you a container developed for an iOS, right? So this is how it works behind, like the single code base. You don't have to write two separate code base. Now, what is the benefit here? You saved like one code base, you're covering both the platform. So it's just half, right? The cost and time that you were giving for the native applications. Correct. And this is not a hybrid application. So here, the library mainly talks with the native APIs of the corresponding platforms and helps you to give a application that has the same look and feel and performance close to a native. So till here, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay, fine. So see, like he says seamless cross-platform. And if you see from here, top, create native apps for Android and iOS using React, this is clear. Written in JavaScript, render with native code. So this is what it means, that you write a single code and you script everything in JavaScript. So this is a JSX, a JavaScript syntax that ultimately gets converted into a kind of a JavaScript code in behind. So I'll show you how it gets converted in the coming sessions, and it renders with native code. So this is how like it talks, right? This is, you can see that, meaning that your apps use the same native platform API. So this is what I was doing, right? I was telling you like the React Native talks to the native UI API and renders you a view. Then it's a native development for everyone. So that's what I was saying, that React Native lets you to creatively create truly native apps and does not compromise your user experience. It provides a core set of platform agnostic native components like view, text, and image that map directly to a platform native UI binding blocks. So it means the same, like if you see here, see here, in this app, it's talking to this one of the component in Android. It also talk to one of the component in iOS and then render something. So seamless cloud platform means same code base run on two different platforms. You don't need to write it. It also supports fast refresh. Here it means that you do not need to compile the application and again whenever there is a change. So as soon as you write something, you save something, it immediately gets reflected on your mobile screen, right? So I think now you have a very fair difference, like what is React and what is React Native. So basically React is used to build a web application, right? And React Native is used to build a mobile application. And if you see, here is a long list of versions coming up. So currently is 0.67, and in React, what is the version? Anyone can tell? It's 17.0.2. So when we are gonna start with our regular classes, so what we are gonna do is we are gonna learn major the concepts of React, and you learn everything that is in React Native, like what are the components, how it gets arranged. So what I'll be teaching, so first of all, I'll be giving a very quick, very brief introduction about React and React Native that I already gave, but I'll cover once again the major difference between React and React Native. I will tell you how to set up an environment. Then I'll also tell you how to set up an editor, and then we start with all the core concepts of React Native, like how you can, what is state props. We'll start with the React concept. What is state props? How do you render element? What is JSX? And conditional rendering. And then to the UI part, like how you can create a beautiful UIs in the mobile devices. I will also teach you how to identify a correct library, how to make a mobile application responsive, networking, I'll cover. Then I'll also cover navigation, state management, Firebase. So all those things, mostly I'll cover most of the things, right? Local storage and lots of things I will cover going further. So till here, do you guys have any doubt on now you guys understand was basically React and React Native is, right? Now it's a question time for you. Like I'll give an opportunity to you guys to ask me a questions if you have in the mind.
No.
If you guys have questions, you can speak it up. Maybe Banu, Manoj, Senthil. No? Okay, so now it's time for the introduction of myself. So my name is Animesh, and I have around 10 years of experience working on this React Native, AWS. Like I'm a kind of a full stack developer who works for both web, mobile, and currently I am located in Japan. So if you see, my time is 11 o'clock here, so it's 3 hours 30 minutes ahead of India. Yeah, and I'm working for primarily for the web and mobile applications. And I have a fair experience of AWS, Git, everything. Yeah. So if you guys have any questions, you please pick it up. I'm still open to answer your questions. If you feel we are good, we can end the demo session, or else or we can, if you have question, you please speak it up so that I can proceed ahead. Bagu, Manoj, Senthil, any questions?
No, sir.
No. Swati, are you there?
Yeah, Animesh.
Yeah, so